Hello, everybody. I'm Rabbi Daniel Brenner, and it is a pleasure to welcome you to this edition of Raising Up Teens. We have a wonderful program set up tonight that's going to be in three acts. The first act is going to be talking with three folks who have been working with boys in the Jewish community, people that I turn to, people who I know have deep experience and knowledge about what teen boys are going through because they have mentored many, many teen boys, and they pay attention to what's going on, not only in teen boys' social and emotional lives, but in their spiritual lives as well. And then we're going to hear from two teens in two very different places, in two very different cultures of masculinity, talk about their journey and talk a little bit about the experiences that brought them into this conversation, a Jewish conversation about becoming a mensch. And then in our third act, we're going to be speaking with my wonderful colleague, Rabbi Tamara Cohen, who is a parent of boys, and is also someone who writes so beautifully about her experience as a parent and thinking about raising a mensch. So that's what we have in store. But before we get started, I just want to say a little bit about raising up teens and why we're doing all this. So a few months ago, there was a new study, a research project that was done by the Jewish Federations of North America that involved researchers from Stanford University. It was under their project, which is called BBYO. And this new study looked at almost 3,000 Jewish teenagers and asked them questions about their mental health. And one of the things that we learned from that study is that this has been a profoundly challenging time for many teenagers. And being a Jewish person and encountering hatred towards Jewish people has been almost as stressful as the number one source of stress in the lives of teens, which of course is academic stress. So we're just conscious that many teens right now are going through a lot. And we're really thrilled that we have a couple of teens here who can talk about how they cope and how they build resilience and how they find joy, even when there are a lot of stressors on their lives. Moving traditions partners with schools, with camps, with synagogues, and with JCCs, and creating teen experiences where teens can explore the core issues of their lives in a micro community that focuses on social, emotional, and spiritual learning. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment, but I just want to say that we focus our attention on really three Jewish values: shlemut, chesed, and tzedek. Shlemut is about feeling wholeness, feeling peace, feeling like you can be who you truly are. Chesed is about loving kindness and building relationships. And tzedek is about seeing the ways that the world is broken and finding ways to pursue equity and justice. So that is the focus of our work. That's really the focus of what we're doing tonight. And to kick off this particular conversation, which is of focus on teen boys, I want to bring into the conversation David, Adam, and Eric, three of my colleagues, three of the people that I have had deep conversations with about this topic. And I want to just kick things off by just saying hi. Great to see you all. Could each of you just say a little bit about what you do and where you are? David, could you kick us off?
Hi, thanks for being here. Thanks for asking me to be here. My name's David Leiberman. My day job, I'm a documentary film editor, and I worked with teens at my synagogue for over 11 years. And for many of those, I was involved in Moving Traditions programs back when it was called Brotherhood, Shevet. Um, uh, yeah, starting with the pilot, and I brought several groups of boys from eighth grade through high school, and I'm still in touch with many of them, which has been a joy. So really happy to
Amazing.
be here.
Thank you for joining us, David. Adam.
Uh, Hi, I'm Adam Karp. I work for BaMidbar Therapy. We do outpatient therapy. We also do professional development for Jewish organizations across the country. And I cut my teeth writing curriculum for Moving Traditions. I started working on Shevet curriculum in eighth grade for the eighth grade program. And ironically, even though I've always had like teen boys in my heart, the more I've done enrichment programs through Bummy Bar, the less I've worked with teen boys.
Mm,
And that's one of the things we can talk about is how boys aren't taking advantage of enrichment opportunities as much as maybe they used to.
yep.
Um, and also just in my personal life, I practice Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and that has a lot of associations with maybe a different strain of masculinity. And it's a sport that I really love, and it's just kind of interesting the different realms of masculinity that I interact with, both personally, professionally. Um, yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Adam, great to have you here. And Eric.
Hi, my name's Eric Hunker. I live in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I serve as BBYO's Director of Music and Aleph Enrichment. Aleph Enrichment is the language that we use, a little bit of InSpeak that we use to talk about making mensches, really, the healthy masculinity, consent culture, healthy relationships. I've been working with BBYO for this is my 18th year.
Wow.
Most of that work has been in the realm of communal singing, song leading, building a music culture around the world. But for the past 6 years or so, I've been doing this work of Aleph Enrichment.
Amazing. So just great to have you all here. So thank you so much. And I want to start by trying to set the stage about this conversation about teen boys. Um, I was absolutely um, I would say I was riveted by the work of Richard Reeves when he first came out, when he was working at the Brookings Institution, when he first came out with a major study of boys in America. And some of the things that he said have just stuck with me, that boys are 3 times as likely to be addicted than anyone else, that boys are 12 times as likely to be incarcerated as anyone else. Like that there are some things that are going on with boys. He found that boys really, he pointed 4 things out: that boys are having incredible educational struggles. They're falling behind in school, often falling behind by the third grade and never really catching up. The mental health challenges of boys are very real, mainly depression that leads to suicide, and the failure of many boys to get help when they are feeling loss or feeling hurt. The third thing that he points out is the incredible social isolation that many boys experience, and feeling like they don't have friends, feeling like they are alone, feeling like they spend a lot of their time in a digital environment where they're trying to make connections, but they're really not making serious connections, connections that have some vulnerability and intimacy. And fourth, that boys are kind of confused about where they fit into the world now, because it seems to them that men are not valued in the ways that men used to be valued. And so all of those things are part of the conversation right now around what are the things that teen boys need, what are the pressures that are on them, and what is going on in their kishkas, I would say, in their deep emotional lives, what is going on. So I want to start the conversation there and hear your perspective on the crisis, but really ask you, are you seeing this crisis in the Jewish community with Jewish boys? So I want to kick it off with asking that question to Adam. Adam, you have a mental health background. You've been working now for a number of years as a mental health counselor. What have you seen? What concerns you? What do you think may be like, yeah, that's normal. Maybe people are a little bit too concerned about it.
Yeah, well, I think it's important to name that, particularly some of the concerns that they raise in the book of Boys and Men around academic success, around financial success, that is really class oriented in a lot of ways. And that, in fact, many of the boys that we might interact with in settings such as BBYO or movie traditions, it might not affect that particular aspect, might not affect our boys. In fact, the lower you go down in the socioeconomic ladder, the more likely you are to be really affected by those changes, and also the more likely you are to be married to a traditional gender role script. And that's actually something that a lot of people on this call are probably letting go of in a lot of ways. So there's a lot of confusion to go around, but maybe not so much confusion for everybody as much as the teen boys who are like, well, what am I supposed to do and who am I supposed to be listening to? Um,
Absolutely. Yeah. So I just want to point out, like Adam, I often say that, the majority of people in America do not go to college, but close to 90% of American Jews do go to college. So there is that reality that, when we ask Jewish teens specifically about what's going on in their lives, academic stress is number one for a reason. That's what we are expecting of our teenagers. And so, yes, there are some very important class things to pay attention to.
But I will also just say one aspect that I'm seeing just in my work as a mental health counselor, as a trainer in team mental health first aid, is that um, in general, a lot of people are not totally comfortable seeing their kids struggle with big, big emotions.
Mm,
And I hear a lot of boys talking about when they tell their parents that they're struggling. That there's sort of like a hot potato moment and be like, oh, I hear you, but this might be because of social media or because of that. And because maybe the parents haven't necessarily dealt with what it means to be struggling with really tough emotions. And so there's just sort of that natural emotional component that people aren't always comfortable being around or hearing. And just that's something that I'm encountering a lot in my practice. Yeah.
yeah, I've been listening to the words of Anna Lemke from Stanford, who like writes about how parents, are always saying, "I just want you to be happy," but what she wants parents to be thinking is, "I want you to feel what you're feeling." But parents are afraid to feel those feelings. Parents are afraid to feel grief and hurt and rejection. And what I think Lemke is pointing out is that the more that we're addicted to digital media, the more we're looking for a quick hit of happiness and not feeling what we're feeling. And
Yeah.
so we're both struggling to feel what we're feeling. And so sometimes that plays like the way parents like to do that is like, my kid is the one who has the problem, not me. I'm not here for me. I'm here for my kid. Uh,
Yeah, I'll just share it before, and I want to make sure everybody has a chance to talk. But in my work, especially with the younger clients that I have, I always talk with parents, and I will ask the parents, well, how does the behavior seeing affect you? And I would say it takes maybe 5 times for them to finally talk about how it affects them, as opposed to just talking about
mm,
what they're seeing with their kid.
mm.
Um,
Okay, but still, I want to just ask you just, do you think that the boys are in crisis, or do you feel like the things that Reeves talks about, boys not wanting to reach out for help, do you see that with Jewish teens?
I'm really gonna pass this off to the guys who
All right, all right. I'll
know.
go to David. Let me go to David for that. David, um, did you see any teen boys that were in crisis and just couldn't reach out?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the reason that the program was brought into my synagogue in the first place is because there were some teens who were like ancillarily involved witness to like a sexual assault at a party.
Mhm.
And we were like, it sort of started with a crisis. But I think all of the boys I worked with to some extent or another were dealing with issues of isolation, issues of like stress levels from all different areas that had profound sort of impact on their daily lives, on their ability to function. And I think I think they're getting a lot of I think one thing that they were getting was a lot of messages from all places, you know, their parents, teachers, the internet, the culture in general, about what men should be, how men should be, what they should be, and there was like a real lack of, I would say, like curiosity and compassion. Everything, there's a lot of like prescriptive, and I think the boys that I worked with felt like alienated and pretty shut down, and because of that, and you know, and with the Shevet groups, they had a space to explore and talk with each other that really made a difference. But you know, like I started before the Me Too movement, and then finished somewhat after, and the messaging a lot of them were getting was that they were like bad, you know, like toxic.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and what I found was that they like they were really pushing back against that, and that was like that was not a message that was helping them grow and change. And I think one of the lessons from my time with teens is like, again, this curiosity, and maybe like sort of a think about like maybe wounded masculinity or then toxic, and like where the behaviors, and all of them, you know, at some point or another, exhibited behaviors that were disruptive to the group, or like cruel to their friends, or you know, like you know, language that was like, you know, problematic. But learning to meet that with like acceptance and love and curiosity, and see like where's the hurt that this is coming from, and not saying like, don't say that, or that's toxic, or like let's unpack this word, let's unpack this idea, where's it coming from. But yeah, so I think a lot of messages, and also one thing, like the a lot of the boys that I was dealing with, several of them were having like body dysmorphia, eating disorders, like that, you know, like real, so like real, like they were really impacted by these prescriptive ideas about who they should be.
They're
Yeah,
really hurting deep down. Yeah.
they are, and not even having like maybe the vocabulary or the emotional intelligence to even recognize it as hurt, you know.
Wow. Eric, I saw you listening, and I'm sure you're thinking about some of the guys you've worked with. What were some of the things coming up for you?
Yeah, I mean, I'll share one quick anecdote because I think it describes something that I'm seeing broadly, which is I get to teach Limud, like this class during the summer at a summer program that BBYO offers called Kala. And the program is basically in this world of discussion. It's unpacking gender structures, how they affect us, how, you know, this is rising juniors and seniors in high school, how to navigate that, how to make choices for ourselves. And there was a moment, I usually teach this 1 week with male identifying teens, 1 week with female identifying teens, and then 1 week anyone can come. And in the female identifying week, a girl raised her hand and asked if she could ask a question to the room. And I was like, yeah, sure. And she said, you know, only answer if you're willing to answer, like if you're comfortable, but how many of you see a therapist? And the whole room, I mean, 95% of the room raised their hand and were laughing and sharing their therapist's names. It was like,
Okay.
it was actually a beautiful moment
Right.
of therapy being so normalized in a way that I certainly didn't grow up with, and not something that I experienced in the boys' week. And she went on to say, I'm not sure if that question was asked in the boys' week, but I would bet if it were asked in the boys' week, the room would not feel like this. And she continued to say, and if I'm being totally honest, if a male friend shared with me that they were seeing a therapist, my first gut reaction, not like in my thinking, but in my feeling, would be that I would be kind of concerned as to why they are. And I think that my instinct is to feel like we've come so far in therapy being normalized, in mental health awareness being an issue of concern for many of us. And I even in Jewish spaces, you know, even in a BBYO space, I think we're not nearly as far as I thought that we were in that being normalized in all male spaces. I think it's still looked at with some level of suspicion or skepticism or doubt as to is that a way that we just keep ourselves healthy, or is that treating some kind of underlying issue?
I always remind people that when Tony Soprano goes into Dr. Melfi's office, he's like, I'm done with this. I don't need this anymore. Like that's the opening about every therapy session. And then of course, like what happens is he realizes how deep his wounds are. And it's really very powerful. Like here is the this great gangster who needs nobody. And he's just in so much pain. So I think it's important to not only recognize that there are some different ways that boys approach talking about their emotions, talking about their feelings, reaching out for help. But also, I think it's important to talk about like specifically how Jewish boys are reacting in this moment. So I want to share an anecdote and get your responses to this anecdote. I was in a suburb of Los Angeles, not a very Jewish area. I was working with a group of teenagers, all of them were from public schools. And I did a very simple exercise around the four corners of the room. And I said to this group, it was about 30 teens, mixed genders, and I was like, okay, if everybody at your school knows you're Jewish in this corner, if most people at your school know that you're Jewish in this corner, if some people at your school know you're Jewish in this corner, and if nobody at your school knows you're Jewish in this corner, but by the way, nobody went into this corner, like everybody had some people that knew that they were Jewish. But what was really interesting was um, in the corner, everybody at my school knows I'm Jewish, were only boys. And then in the corner where most people, mostly girls, few boys. And then in the corner, like some people, it was like very mixed. But what was interesting to me was asking all these teens, like, why did you end up in this corner? And the thing I heard from these boys was, oh, yeah, this kid was Heil Hitlering me. And so I pushed him. And then, like, they made an announcement about, like, we're having a tolerance day because everybody knew about what had happened. And then every day now I go to school, everybody's like, oh, there's the Jew. Like, it was that kind of situation. And he said, I hate the fact that everybody at my school knows I'm Jewish. And the other kid, a very similar kind of story where he was competing with another kid academically, and the other kid, like, kind of said something about him being a Jew, and he got very upset about it, and then he got detention. So it got me thinking, are you hearing how boys are reacting to a sort of a resurgence of hatred against Jews? Like, is this something that you're hearing about or seeing? I'd love to hear just from any of you, and to respond to the story or to respond to some of the things that you've noticed. Eric, go for it.
Yeah. So a pretty common feature at a lot of conventions that happen, like retreats that happen in the BBYO world, is it's called separates programming, but it's basically young men getting into a room and having some kind of programming that speaks to some current issue. Young women getting into a similar room, and then there's also normally a mixed gender offering at the same time. And oftentimes these like follow the format of some kind of sharing, or it'll allow for a space of sharing. And I've definitely noticed it's always existed to some degree, depending on what, where in the world you're going to these experiences, like in the middle of America or in the deep South. I think sometimes these things have been more commonplace in the past. I would say over the last 2 years, it's almost reverse course in that way. But a very common thread that we're seeing constantly is in any moment that you're giving young men the opportunity to share and share vulnerably in any way, 80+% of the time they're sharing about anti-Semitic incidents at school. Whereas we used to get a lot of folks opening up about family struggles that they were having, or academic stress, or losing elections for board positions, things like that. That's been almost completely eclipsed by what they're experiencing, obviously, generally in public schools. But yeah, we're seeing it all the time.
Mm. David, did you want to add anything to that?
I just want to I guess maybe reflect on my own I grew up in I went to Jewish day school. I grew up in Manhattan. I was surrounded by Jews and had a lot of pride, I should have maybe, but when I was a teenager and well into college, when I was outside of those spaces and even inside of them, I had real sort of shame about being Jewish. Like I would hope people wouldn't find out. If I had summer jobs, working outside of New York City, working at working in restaurants, and at some point someone would clock it. They didn't know my last name. And I just remember I was always we had to wear a kippah in school, and I would take mine off immediately when I went outside, and on a day that I left it on, I would be so terrified. So that now even more so because of like global events but I think there's something that at least in my experience, like boys and men are being told, the messaging that we're getting is that there's like a weakness, or there's some shame involved, or something, or a vulnerability, I guess, like when in this otherness, and vulnerability is like really difficult for men and boys in our country. So I want to say that it's been, even myself, who was raised, going to synagogue basically every weekend and at a Jewish day school, still got this message that it was something I should hide if I could. And I see that with the boys that I work with as well.
Mm. Adam, what's coming up for you in this conversation?
I I think a lot of the boys I work with are in sort of that Jewish bubble that you're kind of referring to, David, like where you're experiencing a lot of like positive reinforcement, maybe Jewish community, maybe inside your community, but like maybe not in Manhattan, where like, there's going to be lots of other people around regardless. But I encounter a lot of kids who are pretty happy being Jewish and maybe don't complain so much about in-person anti-Semitism in their school system, maybe a lot of online stuff. But one of the things I think about in this conversation is what happens to those kids when they go to college, or they step outside that community and they experience that for the first time. That like how resilient is that identity going to be once the first person, makes some sort of joke to them that they never encountered before. And I think that there's a lot in there that seems similar to some of the conversations that we've had over the years, Daniel, about like the way that um, boys don't always set themselves up to be resilient about their friendships. Like they're all about their friends when they're young, but when they get older, all of a sudden, like they don't have anybody to call when they're in a tough spot. Um, and so just thinking about that resilience, that like battle-tested identity and that battle-tested friendship stuff just seems to that's the theme that's coming up for me in this one.
Yeah, so important. So, I wish we could talk longer, but I said we got 3 acts tonight, so I'm going to go into Act Two. Again, we'll all come back. And folks, if you have questions for David, for Adam, or Eric, we're going to come back to them. But now I'm going to welcome 2 incredible teenagers, both of whom participated in Moving Traditions Kumi. You can learn more about Kumi online, but and they participate in a bunch of other Jewish programs also, or at least I know that Coley also is involved in BBYO. Solomon, are you involved in any other Jewish things?
Yeah, I am. Not
Fantastic.
BBYO, but yes, others.
Other things. Okay, amazing. All right, so let me just ask you to just quickly introduce yourselves, where you are, meaning like where you are, where you go to school, and how about like one thing that you do, other than school, one thing that you love to do in free time or that sort of thing. Solomon, could you kick us off?
My name is Solomon Fishman. I am in Philadelphia right now and live there. Um, and I go to a Quaker school actually. And I guess one thing that I enjoy doing in my free time when I'm not at school and doing whatever else I do, a lot of different activities. I find myself writing a lot, whether that's journalism or creative writing or personal writing or analytical. So I really like
Amazing.
writing and reading.
Amazing. Amazing. Me too. Thank you for sharing that, Solomon. Coley.
Hi, I'm Coley Robertson. I'm from Charlotte, North Carolina, and I go to Providence Day School. So outside of school, I love sports in general, but and I work for my school's football team, but my favorite sport is basketball. So I'm watching NBA games. Pretty much like most of the video games I'm playing is like NBA 2K. So I'm spending a lot of time around basketball. I mean, even behind me, there's a basketball in like the back corner of my room. Like,
Fantastic.
yeah, an
All right.
NBA All-Star basketball in the corner. So I pretty much like all the stuff around my room, my bedding when it's made is and covered with NBA logos. I'm a big basketball guy. So that's
Beautiful.
my thing.
Side note, one of the first NBA franchises was the South Philadelphia Hebrew Association basketball team. One of the original franchises. Okay, that's a separate note. I'm a Jewish history buff. All right, so I want to actually get us started with, asking you to share a little bit about, your connection to this question about like what does it mean to be a man? What is masculinity about? And Solomon, when you and I spoke before, you were telling me like some of the deep memories that you had from childhood, and like what it was like to see boy culture, even though you maybe not have defined it as masculinity, but could you share a little bit about like what you remember from your 5-year-old self?
Yeah, so I mean, when I was 5 years old, as most 5-year-olds do, they're not like super aware of like the deeper um things at play in the world around them. So like I was whatever, a 5-year-old, and my parents had signed me up to play like recreational soccer. Um just, to like have fun, um, be active and that I guess that was my first experience with really seeing like intense masculinity, which kind of surfaced in this like intensely competitive spirit that almost felt like a little bit, there was definitely a lot of like dominance and just like this like will and desire to like assert some sort of like power over other people through maybe that was winning. And for me, that just wasn't how I connected with masculinity or how I connected with just the things that I did. I mean, I came to soccer from like my like art class that was before then with like paint all over my soccer jersey. So it was just not how I saw it. And like it was something that ultimately I stopped playing soccer after a while, but it was something that was a little hard. And like looking back on it, now I can kind of connect those dots there.
Mm, great. Thank you for sharing that story. It's so powerful and resonant for me. Um, so Coley, when we spoke, I was fascinated by your role as a coaching assistant on the football team. And I know it's a serious competitive high school football team where some of the players go on to play on Division 1 level, and like this is like a big deal. Um, what have you absorbed um, by being in a locker room situation and being around guys who are like I think some are like asserting themselves and trying to dominate. What have you learned? What are the positives and what are some of the negatives?
Yeah, well, there's a whole slew of things. I've learned a lot about community is definitely a big part of it. They've become the guys on the team have become some of my closer friends. In school, like when I'm in the lunch line, those are the guys I talk to a lot. In individual circumstances, I don't really move with like them as a large group because, there's a lot of teasing and a less like of the actual like fundamental basis of being together when it's them just screwing around at school. But being in the locker room, I hear a lot of great things and a lot of negative things. Some of the negatives are more like they don't always talk the most respectfully about other people sometimes. Each other is pretty like build each other up. It's like on the football field, they always, are on each other's side. They would like there's been moments in games where they were ready to fight for another guy on the team and a coach or I had to stop them. The community is strong within that, but there's, outside of the locker room, in the locker room, I've heard them talk about like some girls in ways that they shouldn't have, or even just, like making fun of somebody for not being tough enough. Like they've said things that they shouldn't have, but overall, when it comes to being there, they're always there for each other. They love their our coaches. They're there, and they've shown a lot of respect for me. Some of them I've known since we were kids, but be me working for the team. A lot more of them who I may not have considered really friends as we were younger, I've grown to become closer with. So.
Yeah, sounds like a lot of positive experiences, and of course some things that are concerning.
Hmm.
When we kicked this off, we talked a little bit about what Richard Reeves had found around social isolation of men. And I remember in our conversation, you talked a little bit about that social isolation. Can you say a little bit about like what it is like to be a teen boy? What do you think is happening in terms of the social isolation and why it exists?
Yeah, so I will say it's hard to put into words. It was hard to put into words when we talked, but I would say that sorry, could you repeat the question? I need to
Just
think
like
about it.
how have you experienced social isolation either yourself or seen it with friends, and like do you see that that's a thing that's happening in boys' lives?
Yeah, so I mean that right now it feels like that's happening with teenagers all over the place. At my school, we're pretty diverse, race, gender, all sexuality, although least of which sexuality, but we're still pretty good in all areas. And I've seen isolation from everybody, but it's definitely with guys, I feel like we definitely don't love to talk about it. I mean, even for an example from me personally, this was a couple weeks ago and I was frustrated about some school stuff and I was talking to my mom, and I was in her room and I like started to be overwhelmed and I like was starting to, be in tears and frustrated. And she called my dad up from being downstairs and they came in and both were talking to me. And while I was upset, I kept saying over and over, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine, even though I was
Mm,
because I was
yeah,
just trying to, shrug it off. Uh,
yeah.
and they both kept telling me, if you're crying while saying you're fine, you're not fine. So there's definitely a lot of me trying to, be what I would consider being strong a lot of the time. I mean, even like I've talked to my parents about getting a therapist, but every time we talk about it, I do clench up a bit because I don't like admitting that I'm not strong enough to just like bulldoze through things. So
Mhm.
that's a big part of masculinity for sure. And I've seen that in friends. I mean, we don't like when I'm with a lot of my friends at school specifically, I've barely seen scenarios where we talk about feelings. It's about like if I'm talking to guys, it's mostly about schoolwork. If it's football guys, football, or if I used to play basketball, so I'm friends with a lot of the basketball players and it's talking about what they're doing. Like it's not often about feelings, but when I talk to female friends, there's a lot more of the emotional aspect to it. And I think a lot of that comes from I'm better at opening up to the girls I know because I don't feel as worried about like the social stigma when it comes to that. I
Mhm.
don't want to admit to another dude that I'm not feeling great. but when I'm talking to a female friend, most of the time it feels like they're going to get it. So it doesn't feel as it feels like more talking to my mom or another female person in my life where it doesn't feel like as much pressure to be
Mm.
okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Coley, for going that personal and sharing like what it's really like for you. I'm
Mm.
sure many people are just thinking, oh my God, I wish every boy could hear what Coley has to say right now because it's really beautiful. Um, Solomon, um, when we spoke, I learned that you had had some work experience working as a dishwasher. I don't know where this was, a restaurant or something like that. Was that okay? And you were telling me that that was actually a really challenging environment to be in. Can you share a little bit about like some of the things that you encountered there and really how that impacted you?
Um, so yeah, I guess like I'm gonna like start this off with kind of like framing like where I fit into this whole picture of masculinity, because I think it's kind of important to this. Um, so I think um as a queer Jewish person, I've kind of been in the margins of masculinity and also sometimes of Jewish male spaces. So I think for me that has kind of been like a great thing as well as like a it's been a challenge in some ways. Like it has given me the ability um and I would say like to maybe not be exposed to as much of the extreme sides of masculinity. Um, but it has also kind of created, and it has kind of let me avoid um parts of masculinity I don't want to associate with, which I appreciate, and kind of form community outside of that realm of masculinity. Um, but I guess where the part where it kind of clashes with and really is challenging is for when that piece of my identity is kind of brought into how I engage in spaces that aren't necessarily um, that are on a different sort of spectrum of male spaces than I'm usually in, or really just communities in general. So it was one time, it was when I was working as a dishwasher in a retirement home.
Mm,
I was confronted about my sexuality to by a bunch of the other male dishwashers. And in that moment, I knew it wasn't safe for me to share um, about my masculinity or about my sexuality. And um, they had also known that I was Jewish, which had posed some other kind of challenges as it was actually a Christian-based retirement home. Um, but so I really like deflected, and then the conversation turned into objectifying others. And like in that moment, I like was kind of panicking and I didn't know what to do because that is absolutely something I'm like completely against objectifying anyone. So I kind of like brought that as a learning moment um and like continued to deflect questions about my sexuality while also trying to give them a fuller understanding of like just how harmful objectifying women is and really objectifying any people um in spaces, especially when that is a space with mostly male people or all male identifying people.
Solomon, thank you so much for sharing about that experience and just, for helping teach the world the bigger message is that we should see the inherent worth and dignity of all humans and like that is just so core to what I was speaking about before this sense of shlemut and like just that everyone deserves to feel that they are perfect just the way they are and valued just the way they are. So really, I want to thank you both for being part of this conversation. I'm going to see you again towards the end. We're going to bring everybody back in. But really, I can't thank you enough. Your stories and your insight and your willingness to talk about your experiences is really invaluable. So thank you. And now I have the great pleasure to turn this conversation to a fellow parent, a parent of boys, and that would be my colleague, Rabbi Tamara Cohen. So, Tamara, this conversation has been amazing, and I kind of want to just say, what what have you been thinking about? What's on your mind? But I do want to respect that I asked you to think a little bit about some of the stories from your own parenting experience and really ground this there first. So let's start there. Just knowing that we have a lot of parents who are tuning in here. What have you learned? What are some of the things that you hope that people will think about when they think about raising boys in this culture of masculinity?
Yeah, I do first have to just thank Coley and Solomon,
Oh,
who I
yeah.
got to know through Kumi. And I think one of the things that was so powerful about the Kumi exploration retreat we had together was that two boys with very different, and not just two, but all of them, ways of connecting as Jews, as boys, like felt a sense of real connection and looking out for each other. And it's just a pleasure and a real privilege to get to create spaces like that. And we've done that through Shevet, and we're doing it now also through programs like Kumi. I think as a parent, I feel gratitude for the work I've done with Shevet. I also have to just call out that my son's youth group, Havonim Dror, and he just came back from his gap year, also has really created, I think, a different kind of space where boys are learning to embrace their vulnerability,
Mm,
and their compassion for
wonderful.
one another, and to listen deeply and really support each other when they're having a hard time, and also really support the girls, and women in their community, and build the skills for deep conversations. So there are a lot of good pockets where that's happening. As the sole woman on this in this great virtual space of some wonderful men, I want to say that for all the women who are in the chat and here, like especially we as moms, we do matter. And it might feel sometimes like we don't, and that the values that we're bringing and the things that we're saying just like are not being heard. I think we heard a little bit from Coley that it matters.
Mm,
And I certainly feel, especially with our 19-year-old now, that we're getting to start to see the ways that little conversations that we've had over the years, difficult moments that we've had, are sort of coming into fruition in terms of like a wonderful, sensitive and caring young man who wants to be a therapist, who focuses on being a therapist to work with boys, and making that less stigmatized. Um, I think that what I've learned is that boys are really sensitive, and have lots of big feelings, and that sometimes it is hard to help them both figure out how to negotiate a world that isn't friendly to big feelings, and we're sometimes like having really big feelings and not being able to control them is a detriment to functioning in society, and also wanting to do that in a way that's like it is okay to cry, and it's important to cry, and it's like it's healing to cry, and so sort of how to hold and navigate that. I also think like boys, like all humans, need a lot of love and respect. And they need us to believe that they are, like David said, like they are good and have the potential to be good. And they need us to tell them when they're making mistakes. And also to share the times that we've made mistakes, and to be honest and in conversation about that. And I do have to say that, like, being from a two-mom family, I think part of what my son has gotten is opportunity to learn about masculinity also from a mother, who, will play all those hard games and do rough and tumble play, and seeing that there are all sorts of different masculinities and that they reside in many of us, regardless of our gender, has helped also break certain norms, um, and help him find a way to take that confusion that Reeves talks about and turn it not into the way of turning against feminism, but really saying, like, there's lots of ways to be a feminist boy today, and I can be proud of that.
Mm. I love that. I know that Reeves himself says the problem isn't that boys aren't feminists, it's that they aren't feminist enough. And it's that we all aren't feminist enough, actually. We're all living in a world where there are these remnants of a world where men were told to take and women were told to give, and like all of the messages you can imagine, like those they're still floating around.
Yeah.
Um,
I
and
think it also takes, from us, from women and women who may have had some negative experiences, like an opportunity to, like, we have a chance to heal by, like, really loving our sons. And I feel so grateful for that. And I feel like it has taught me also how to, embrace, a wider sense of myself and of power in my body that I didn't have as a girl. And when I saw it first in its wildness in, like, my 6-year-old, I kind of wanted to control it. And then I realized, like, wait, I can embrace this, and I can learn from it too. A way of being in space that I didn't have access to, but I want everybody to have access to.
mm, I absolutely love that. That's great. Um, I don't even think I'm finding like I'm learning just from this, what you just said. I don't think about what it's like to be a mother. Like, and like I gotta think a little bit more about that. I'm always concerned that um a lot of Jewish teen boys grow up feeling like their mothers are micromanaging them. And I'm always concerned about that.
Mm.
And I'm not always thinking about, oh my God, there are Jewish mothers who are like raising their sons thinking, I'm learning from this boy, and this is just a great experience for my personal and spiritual growth.
I think all of us parents, maybe it's more mothers, we need to balance, like, our desire to want to keep our kids safe, and not get in trouble, with the knowledge that, like, healthy risk taking is part of what's going to help them learn resilience and how to be in the world, and we can't just protect them from everything. First of all, it will backfire, and second of all, we know it's not the best thing for them. So, like, sometimes that might turn into what looks like micromanaging. And I think it's a rest, trying to hold on to control. I understand it. I love, working with parents and creating curriculum for parents to help them also have community with one another. So it can normalize things. We don't have to, like, hold shame for the mistakes our kids are making, or the places where they are experimenting and risk taking, and we can kind of relax into it, like that's a piece of adolescence, and balance, kind of, again, I want to keep you safe, I want to keep you from doing the bad things, and feeling bad, and also, like, that's part of life, and if we can do the work with ourselves and each other, then we can also allow them to teach us and also teach them.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Tamara. I love that message. I'm mindful of the time. I want to bring everybody back into the conversation. I also have had an opportunity to read a little bit of the chat and some of the questions that are in the chat. So I would love to just first start with David, Adam, and Eric, like, is there anything that came up in this conversation or came up with the teens, came up with Tamara just now, like anything that you're sitting with that you're thinking, this is something, this is a message that I want people to be thinking about, or this is an idea that I want to explore more, or even a question that is coming up for you right now. Just want to give you an opportunity just to reflect back on where the many different roads that this conversation has gone down. Adam.
I just wanted to share that, Coley, your story really touched me, and that it, as a male therapist, I am usually not, regardless of gender, people's favorite first choice of what they want. Men and women often prefer a female therapist because of that. And I had a professor who talked about that in grad school who would he worked in a crisis center, and people would walk in feeling suicidal, and they would see him and be like, is there somebody else I could talk? And what they mean is he's like, it's me. Like, let's talk about you not killing yourself. So it's very that's a really interesting aspect of it. And on the other hand, what I also experience is a lot of mothers who specifically want me because they want their kid to talk to a man. And that's very common in the place that I live. And so, yeah, there's just like that kind of feeling that sometimes people saying like, well, I really want my kid to have someone who's male. And then also there's a tension there because sometimes there's a layer there.
Eric, David, you want to?
Yeah, I'll
go for it.
I'll just say one thing that I've been seeing a lot in the last year, 2 years, especially, with teenage boys, is that there's the algorithms that we encounter like on social media, especially in the world of TikTok, but also kind of in the world of Instagram a little bit, has become really it's become very apparent that it's appealing to a lot of the best of what we see in young men, and can very quickly, depending on how your attention is spent, pull people into really kind of extreme spaces. And I say it specifically because I'm seeing it a lot in what like people refer to as the manosphere, right? If you're familiar with the likes of Andrew Tate or some extreme personalities like that who kind of make their empire of attention, they build that on basically preying on some of the vulnerabilities that we've been talking about tonight. I think I might have actually had some of these conversations with Coley before, but I just want to say out loud so that we can give our attention to it, because it's something that I think about a lot, and I talk with a lot of teen boys about. This is like you can spend 1 minute on a video talking about anti-Semitism, which leads you to another video talking about Jews being targeted, which leads you to another video about like the quote unquote radical left attacking Jews, which leads you to another video, which is, one step away from Andrew Tate. And before you know it, you started on a video that was about anti-Semitism, and within 6 videos or so, a few scrolls or 1 or 2 days, you're starting to get fed a lot of content that speaks specifically to some of the vulnerabilities we were talking about. The idea of being left behind, or the idea of not having space to share, the idea of people not caring about what hurt you're holding. And so I loved so much of what Rabbi Cohen said. And I think it's the more that we can take, what you shared, Rabbi, about having these conversations out in the open, and often inviting these conversations to be had in our family units, and also like in our peer units and in schools and in youth groups, which, wherever they are. I think the more that these conversations live in the shadows, the more that those attention funnels thrive and survive. Yeah, I was just thinking about that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for pointing out that like the positivity um, that we can foster right here is a force against the negativity that is fostered on TikTok and elsewhere. Just people actually, they're looking for something. Like the desire to find something and find meaning is real. It's going to be filled somewhere, and I think that's a uh, important point. David, do you want to? Oh,
I
go
was just
for
gonna
it.
say, I was talking to my older son about like where his empathy comes from, and he said like he feels like a lot has been around like having a younger brother who has kind of a different manifestation of masculinity than him, and having to develop and just loving on him and having to
Mm,
develop a different, like it's changed him. And now I'm seeing with his younger brother, like when he's around little kids, this other part come out. It seems like being in these spaces of caring, with the opportunity to caring in person, like with other kids, is just feels like another antidote to like the online stuff that Eric is talking about.
yeah, absolutely. And I want to say that that's why I just love every time I see a Jewish teen boy who is a teaching assistant in a Hebrew school or is working as a counselor in training at a summer camp. Like every time I see that, I see some of their best qualities just come out, and it just makes me so happy and so proud to be part of that community.
Yeah, we have to
So
raise this, keep raising the status of making those choices because there are non-traditional choices that aren't given as much status in our community or beyond.
absolutely. And they're so incredibly rewarding on so many levels. Absolutely. Um, I want to also just give an opportunity for Coley or Solomon if you want to reflect on some of these ideas, some of the things that we're talking about. I see Solomon, I see you like nodding. Like any what's on your mind, or what are you thinking about?
Um, I guess like I'm trying to kind of like contextualize like the more abstract and like the more of like the parent view with like my own experience, and like I find it really interesting just like how like as well as like having a twin sister and an older sister, and like just like how seeing my parents and like their love for me and their care and like what I need in the moment being different, and also just like how having sisters so close to me has like just really shaped me.
Mm,
Um yeah.
profound. Amazing. Thank you, Solomon. Coley, any thoughts are coming up for you?
Yeah, well, the main thing that I was thinking about through a lot, and I saw this a lot through the chat from people asking about it, was questions about locker room talk and how to handle it and all
Oh
those
yeah.
kind of things. Um, and I've thought about it a lot, especially being in a locker room all the time and having grown up playing sports, loving it, being friends with a ton of athletes. Um, in my experience, it's really hard to do. I mean, like how I've handled it is I've tried to make a difference in small ways. Like there was a situation a couple months ago where a lot of guys I knew in the locker room were well, like one guy was interested in a girl at our school and he was talking about her, and then the other guys were like basically mocking her appearance and say like basically asking him why he was interested in her, which obviously, there's problems with that all over the place. And she's also a super nice person, so it was even worse hearing because I'm friends with this girl and it was uncomfortable to hear. So I subtly, like after practice, after everybody was gone, I told her quietly what like the situation was where some people were not being very nice. And I like, told her because even though, I don't love to like bring the stuff in the locker room outside, but I felt like I had to say something. So I told her, and part of it was also one of the guys who was saying negative things was one of her best friend's boyfriend. So it was even worse because he knew her outside of just a school sense, like had spent time with her. So it was even worse to hear from him too. despite him generally being a pretty good dude. So I told her, and she kept her distance from them, and it worked out. But that was a one specific example of trying to do it in small ways. Otherwise, like, just if your kids are close friends with certain people who may be saying these kinds of things, talking to them one on one is the best way to handle it. um Trying to address it like as soon as they're saying it in the group, like a hey, you shouldn't do that kind of thing, that's never going to work. It's just going to get turned back on whoever is saying it. I don't do that kind of thing. I did when I was a kid, or like when I was playing basketball with high school athletes and they were saying these things and they were like, you'll understand when you're older, which wasn't true because I still don't think they were right. But just trying to do it in a one-on-one sense is best, because if you can appeal to somebody's emotional uh situation, feelings, morality. If they're a good person, generally they're going to try to change their behavior. I mean, as you know, a teenage guy myself, I still talk to other guys about like girls we're interested in stuff, and I'm not completely innocent of that kind of side of it. I would say I'm much less descriptive than other guys I know, but it is okay to like talk about it with one friend or in like a small setting that you're close with. Talk about how you are thinking, how you're feeling, but you always have to approach it with respect. You always have to understand that they're a person too. Don't just talk about them like they're a piece of meat. Um, yeah, I know that was kind of sporadic, but those were some of my
Yeah, it's beautifully sporadic. Thank you for like giving us a little window into your, social reality and friendships, and how you try to navigate uh, being a mensch, which is exactly what this whole conversation was about. How do you be a mensch? One of the teachings that we have in interpersonal relationships in Judaism is about how to give critical feedback, tochacha. And one of the rabbis, famously said, you can't do it in the heat of the moment. And that's because people will just explode back at you and become defensive. You have
that's
to,
something that my parents would say about that exact situation.
yeah, great.
That's how they helped me with those kinds of problems when I was talking about these situations, and I told them that I did respond immediately. They were like, you shouldn't have done that. You should have, approached it in a small way. Talk to them in a smaller setting without making it feel like you're confronting them.
Yes, yes. So I think that that's a big part of what it is to be a mensch, is to like understand like you're going to be in a world with a lot of people behaving badly, and you can't solve it all at once, but you can make a difference by being strategic about investing in relationships and having the conversations and helping people reflect on their behavior and all that. Um, for sure. So anyone else want to respond to the question of how do you deal with the locker room? I know we've like coming to the end now, but I just want to just hear if there's anybody else who had something to say, because I thought it was a really important question. How do we help a person be a mensch in a place where there is no mensch? I think that's really important.
I guess if I could just speak to the parents and the other youth leaders here, that one thing that I found when I was doing this work is that I was terrified basically every time that I was gonna say the wrong thing and mess it up, and especially in more recent years, like since a lot of the social justice awakenings that's been happening, especially for kids who are very online, it was really easy for them to be in a place where they're pouncing on every every phrase, it's just like when you're doing this work and you're working on when you're working with young people and addressing these sensitive issues, like you're gonna say the wrong thing, you're gonna mess up, you're gonna feel embarrassed and like super lame, and I think that's just something that I mean, at the end of every session I was like, oh, I wish I'd said this differently, I wish I handled that differently, but it's so important that you open the door to these conversations, that you try your best, and that you bring your authentic self to these conversations. and that and like and in the messing up that there's good learning there too. So I a lot of this is like it's scary, and these are questions like we're talking about like what Daniel just said, like you're not gonna solve locker room talk, and and like Coley said, like if you speak up you might get shut down. So there like there's a high failure rate and a high mortification rate to any of this work, and just like I just want to encourage everyone to be brave, because even if you like really mess it up and your team like really reads you, you've opened the door, and they'll look back, and they'll know at least that you're someone that you can have these conversations with, and that you are also a human who is struggling with these issues and messing up. So I just wanted to that's my big advice. Like just dive in, be know that it's okay to get it wrong.
Adam, do you want to have, please,
Just like
please.
real quickly, it's just like also that you might not get the response, like the reaction that you're looking for in the time, but there's still a real value in saying your truth. Like, I think it's really important to name that really in any conversation, there's such a strong value to saying what you believe, regardless of how the other person reacts, because in reality, you can't change another person's mind. They change their own mind. And you can think of that interaction as like one more file in the dossier that helps them make the decision to change their mind. Maybe tomorrow, maybe in a week, maybe in 5 years, but like that moment is still really, really important. Um, and also just like from a psychology, talk to any recovering alcoholic. They have to find a really interesting way of saying, no, thank you, I wouldn't like the drink, because there's a natural tendency for people to get offended if you offer them a drink and they say, no, thank you, I don't drink. The same thing happens when someone makes a joke that you don't find funny and you don't laugh. You have to like, there's going to be a natural like friction there, being like, well, what are you saying about me that, I made this joke and you're not like there's sort of that stuff there. So there's a lot of really interesting like psychology at play in locker room talk in terms of saying your truth. There's just a lot of really interesting things there.
I love what you added to that. And just I want to say it's this conversation was what I dreamed of. It was exactly informal. It was actually even more personal than I imagined it would be, which is just like, thank you for bringing it. And thank you for your vulnerability. One of my close friends in this work, Dr. Richard Stern, always says that um, without vulnerability, there isn't real friendship and real deep relationship. You have to go there to like really learn about yourself and about others. You really have opened our hearts. So thank you for doing what you're doing and being part of this conversation. We know that there are lots of parents out there. If there are any parents who would like to be in conversation with us about some of the work that we're doing, we are very interested to know about people's interest in Shevet, which is our program for teen boys. I think people here probably know that we have a wonderful program, Rosh Chodesh, for teen girls. We have Tselem for LGBTQ teens, and we have a bunch of other amazing programs for teens, including Kumi that Coley and Solomon were both on. But I also want to not just plug Moving Traditions. It's great to have BBYO and BaMidbar Therapy here as just like amazing colleagues, amazing partners in this work of doing positive things for teen boys in the Jewish community. And I want to say we could have invited many folks from other places, including the camps that we mentioned before. There's just a lot of good things happening. There needs to be more of it. So it's really wonderful to have this and to have a spotlight on the work that's being done for teen boys. Um, we love learning about what we do. We're going to also drop a survey in the chat. So if you would like to give us some feedback about tonight, we're always looking to improve. We're always looking to really face the tough questions that are on parents' minds and really help others in raising up teens. So thank you again to David, Eric, Adam, Solomon, Coley, and my wonderful colleague, Rabbi Tamara Cohen, for really making this such a worthwhile conversation. And thank you all for joining, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks. Take a moment to do the survey. Thank you also to my wonderful colleague, Daniel.
Updated all my stats. My breath smelling like Similac. Can tell by the friendly chat. You're up for the Milky Wax. These notes will ignite you, and my chest hair will entice you. Before the night is done, we'll have lots of fun. That bouncy way you strut, you slip me out the cut. I know you want my stuff, cause my funk is real enough. Sex Panther on the chase, that sensual